But in this lesson, we'll discuss about how to create a virtual machine using Portal. And we'll see what are the options available. So in the last lesson, we understood about what are the purchase options available for a virtual machine, where we see a pay-as-you-go model, reserved instances, and spot instances. And we discussed about the Azure images. The image is nothing but an OS image, which just comes with the preloaded with the virtual machine. And we discussed about the various virtual machine sizes and categories. The categories like general purpose category, memory category, memory optimized, compute optimized, storage optimized, GPU, and high performance computing like that. So before we start creating a virtual machine, so before we start creating a virtual machine, so we need to have like what category, I would say, in which category the VM should be created. Like, do you want to go with an compute optimized? Do you want to go with an memory optimized? Do you want to go with an storage optimized? Then what VM size you want it? Then third, what operating system is required or is required in the VM? Fourth, in which resource group it needs to be created? Then in which subscription it has to be created? So it has to be created. So before we start creating a virtual machine, make sure that you have the information like which category, which size, and what OS is required inside the VM, in which resource group, and in which subscription it is required. So because during the creation of a virtual machine, the subscription and resource groups are mandatory, and all this information for virtual machine are mandatory. So let's see that how we can create a virtual machine. I'm just going to the portal. Log into the portal. So let me go to the subscriptions. So we see there is a subscription called as a free trial. As I said, by default, Microsoft will create a free trial subscription with 1 month validity and 15,000 rupees worth of resources, which has been given to us. Okay, so whichever comes first, then which basically. So go to the resource group. So we can create a resource group during the creation of virtual machine also, or we can create the resource groups and keep it ready. So I'm selecting the subscription free trial. I'm creating a resource group called as an RG-, let's say web app VMs. I'm just giving it for a purpose. And which region you want to have it. So I want to go within Central India. Okay. So resource group got created. So I'm creating one more resource group. I'm saying RG-, I would say called as an SAP VMs. I'm selecting Central India, review and create, and create it. Create it. So now go to the service. Either you can see in the favorites, the virtual machines, okay, or you can basically search for a virtual machine service in the search bar, and you can basically look for virtual machines. Now, as of now, we don't see any virtual machines exist in this tenant, what we call as an Azure account. So I'm creating an Azure virtual machine. Click on the create Azure virtual machine. So first thing it is asking me subscription. If there are multiple subscriptions available, then you can click on this and you can choose the subscriptions. Resource group, under which resource group you want to create this resource. So we created a SAP VM, a web app VM resource groups. I'm selecting this one and a virtual machine name. Okay. So this is not basically guest operating system name. This is a virtual machine name. So this is basically identified in the Azure portal or Azure resources. So I'm giving it SAP, or I would say called as a web app, a VM1, web VM1. So under which region you want to create this VM? The resource group is created in Central India. The virtual machine can be created in South India or West India. So it is not necessary that the resource should be created only under the resource group, under the region of the resource group. The resource group can exist in a different region, and the resource can exist in a different region of it. So I'm selecting Central India. So availability options. Now Central India has multiple zones. Now see availability zone. So under which availability zone you want to create this virtual machine? Under which availability zone you want to create? So you can choose zone 1 or zone 2 or zone 3. So it is within the central region, Central India region. It is going to create a virtual machine under an availability zone 1. Now you can select multiple zone 1 and 2 and 3. So what happens in this case is it is going to create 3 virtual machines in 3 different zones. It is going to create 3 virtual machines in 3 different zones. If I select zone 1 and 2, then it will create a virtual machine in zone 1 and zone 2. It creates 2 virtual machines. Now I'm selecting zone 1. So it creates only 1 virtual machine. Security type, later I'll talk about it. We'll understand. Now let's go to the image. So as I said, image is basically an operating system. So what operating system you want inside this VM? So click on this. So favorites recently used will be available here. And if you find, or if you're not able to find your operating system, then you can see all images. And you can look here. Okay. So I'm selecting Windows Server. Under that, you can see called as in click. Here you see so many Windows Server operating systems. Now, which one you want to have it? So I'm selecting in a Windows Server 2016. I don't need a server core. I need in Chinese. No. I'm selecting a Windows Server data 2019 data center. So which is available, free services available. That means that this image is available as part of the free service. Now, what size you want it? So click on see all sizes. So you'll see the type, general purpose, and CPUs, RAM, and the size. The size. Now you can add a filters to filter it. Okay, you want to have a type only general purpose, or you want to have compute optimized, so that you get the compute optimized series. Then you see under the F series, we have 2 things. One is in 2 process 4 GB RAM, previous generations, then insufficient quota family limit. So we see request. That means there is a restrictions on my account where I cannot create these things because of a trial account and unsupported generation. These are old ones which are not existing. Okay, I'm just trying to create an N4 process with 8 GB RAM, which is an FSPO4, or I can let me go to the filter and add a type called as a general, and let me filter it because the general purpose are a bit cheaper compared to the other things. So let me go with an A2 process with 8 GB RAM, which is D2AS. Select this. Now we would see username, password, and so when a Windows virtual machine is created, normally in an on-prem environment, we see administrator as a user account, which exists as a default, and we set the password during the installation. But in Azure Cloud, the administrator account is not being used. The default administrator account is being disabled, or we cannot use like an admin or something like that. So we have to provide a user account. The Azure will create this user account and adds into the local administrator group so that we can perform any kind of an activity on that particular virtual machine or OS. So I'm creating a user account called as an Azure user and a password of basically a 12 characters, and you can give it whatever you feel that complexity, what we see in the on-prem, like anywhere things. Okay. And I'll come to this later. So what we provided as a basic is, and we provided a name of the virtual machine, and we selected a subscription resource group under which region and availability zone, in which availability zone you want to create, and what operating system you want to have it, and what size you want to have it. And what is the user account and password, through which we can access this particular virtual machine or communicate. And just say review and create. So it goes to the basic and giving some information is missing over here. What is that information? So I selected a Central India. I'm creating in this. Maybe that particular VM size is not available in the one. Let me check. Central India. Okay. Let's see why it is giving an error. Yeah, validation passed. Create it. Here you see 12.911 INR per hour. So it is giving you cost of the virtual machine. So now when we create a virtual machine, so Azure going to create a virtual machine with a VM size, whatever is being specified, then OS, and Ethernet adapter with a private IP address, also assigned a public IP address. So as you create the virtual machine as a default without changing any settings. So default, it is going to create an Ethernet adapter with a private IP address and a public IP address mapped. Then a OS disk, which will be roughly around 127 GB size. So default, the operating system size disk will be 127 GB for many of the VM sizes. Okay. So based on the VM size which you select, sometimes the OS disk may get vary, but in most of the cases for a Windows operating system, the OS disk size is only 127 GB. 127 GB. Now, the virtual machine will get powered on once we create powered on automatically. Like this, these are all various resources which are being associated with a virtual machine. Now, Ethernet adapter is an independent one. A disk is an independent. VM size is an independent. OS is an independent. Basically, they're all clubbed together and basically formed as a virtual machine and given to us. Now, always you can see the progress of any activity which performed and then basically notifications and which you see deployment succeeded. Okay, so any things which we perform, always it shows in the notifications, whatever we carry out. So you can create this. Now you can say your deployment is complete. You can go to the resource. Okay, or we can go to the virtual machines and we'll be able to see the virtual machines. Now the virtual machine name, whatever we give during the deployment, type, subscription, resource group, location, status, and we would see operating system, size, public IP address, and disk. Okay. So in all the resources, you'll find these tabs or basically actions, what we can call it as, and maybe based on the resource type to resource type, these may get vary. And under this, you'll always find the filters. When you have 200 virtual machines created, then you want to find the virtual machines based on a specific resource group or a specific subscription or a specific location or anything which you want to filter it, you can filter it. Okay, or you can search in the search field and you can basically find it. You'll be able to get that. So based on requirement, you can basically filter your resources. In all the resources where you create, one is an action bar will be available and one will be a filter bar which will be available, a filter section where we can basically have it. And you'll have list view and summary view. A summary view will give you, so in most of the cases, you'll have this by default as a list view and which gets displayed over here of it. And you want to group it based on the subscription or a resource group or anything, then it can basically, if you have so many virtual machines created, then you can select a group on, create a group by resource group. So you'll have a resource group name, under that all the resources which are available. Similarly, subscription name, that you can have it like that, no grouping. Okay. So now we created this virtual machine. So I'm creating one more virtual machine. So I'm selecting the web app VM resource group. I'm giving web app 2 VM2 Central India zone 1. I'm selecting Windows Server 2019 data center. Now size, I'm selecting the one which we have selected earlier, 2 CPUs with 8 GB RAM. Then user account, I'm giving it. Now, whatever we are creating this virtual machine, it is a default pay-as-you-go model. Default, it is a pay-as-you-go model. Now it is giving here subscription credit supply 12.911 INR per hour. That means this VM is costing you 12 rupees, almost 13 rupees per hour. Now this including your OS cost, OS license cost. So let me go to the virtual machine step while it is getting created. So I'm going to create another virtual machine, which is for Linux. I'm going to SAP VM resource group. I'm saying called as an SAP VM1. And in Central India, availability zone 1. So I'm selecting Ubuntu Linux. Ubuntu Linux. Now, during the creation of that, we see Spot, run with Azure Spot discount. So as I said, by default, it has a pay-as-you-go model. Now you can request this virtual machine with a spot discount. So we discussed spot is basically discounted price. So Azure is going to provide the virtual machines at a discounted price, but That price may vary based on demand to the demand and basically capacity utilizations. And VM basically the Azure can terminate. We'll see that now. Run Azure with Azure Spot. Now select this one. So when you select this, now we are telling Azure that, hey, this virtual machine will be deployed using the price called as a spot price. Spot price. So apply the spot price. Now eviction type. So when do you want this VM to be stopped or deleted? Because now capacity only. Your virtual machine will be evicted when Azure's excess capacity disappears. It means this virtual machine will be stopped or deleted when Azure excess capacity is exceeded. It means that once the Azure capacity is being exceeded, then automatically this VM will get into stopped state or a delete automatically based on the policy. Now, if you say stop, once the capacity reaches, now Azure announces that now we don't have any capacity for spot instances. The moment the Azure announces that our VM will go into stopped state. If I select a delete policy and capacity only, when Azure announces that, hey, we don't have any more capacity for spot, it means that the moment is being announced, the Azure is going to delete your virtual machine permanently from there. Now, when you select a price or a capacity, now you can define the cost when the capacity is being exceeded and also the cost. So now you can see maximum price you want to pay per USD. Enter a price greater than or equal to the hardware cost. Now is saying greater than or equal to this one. Now the present price, spot price is this one. Now the Azure is providing you virtual machine at this price. Now when you want to, this virtual machine should get deleted. Now you say that, okay, dollar 0.001, I'd say called as 7 or 8, I would say. .008. Now I'm saying that if the Microsoft Azure modifies the price of the VM, and if it goes beyond 0.008, then delete this virtual machine automatically, because we don't want it if it goes above 0.008. So you can give the price. Now present is 0.00622. Let's say Azure increases the price to the 007. Your VM will not get deleted, but you will be charged 0.007. You'll be charged 0.007. But if Azure modifies the spot price to 0.009, but you are given as 008 is your maximum budget, then automatically this VM will get deleted. So based on need to need basis, you can basically select the Azure Spot. As I said, Spot can be used for testing purpose. And if there's data loss, there is a downtime, then you don't see any kind of a problem, then you can basically do that. Okay. So now authentication type, there are two different testings. One is an SSH key for a Linux, one is a password. Later I come to that. Now I'm giving a password. Now by default root user account, we cannot provide it. The root is being reserved in Azure Virtual Machines Linux VMs. Now give a user account. I'm saying Azure user, and I'm giving a password. And create it. It's saying the capacity is not available because we already used it. Because we have some, let me select another region because by default as a free trial account, we have some restrictions. I'm selecting South India. Okay, that size is not available in this one. Let's go and select this. As we see in South India, the price got varied. So 0.02 and review and create. It's going to give a recommendations. Okay, adopt sessions. Not still, it is giving a warning. What is that? We'll see. We're saying the size is not available because of the quota restrictions. Quota restrictions. We're selecting in Southeast Asia. I selected as South India. VM. Let's choose all sizes. I'm selecting in one processor within 3.5 GB RAM. And we'll see still. Okay, so as in a free trial, we have a limits, and due to that, we are not able to create more number of virtual machines because of we consumed all the, I think, 4 process with 6 GB. We'll come back to that next one. That's how you can use Spot instances. Okay. Now, when you go to the VM, click on the VM. So in order to view the VM details, so when you click on the VM, you'll see the VM name overview tab. And at that right side, you can see resource group, operating system, size, running location, then public IP address assigned to this virtual machine, subscription, then which network it belongs to that. Okay. Down, you'll see able to see the actions. Then we would see properties of this machine and monitoring your CPU utilization, memory utilization. It may take up to some time. It comes later. We will understand the capabilities of this one. Okay, and recommendations given by the Azure. And left side, you will see the basically menu items. Okay, for each and every item, you have the respective action tabs, filters, and the resources under that. Okay, later we can see that one by one. Okay. Okay. So when I go to the virtual machine and overview tab, so we have 4 different actions. VM will have a start option, stop option, a restart, and delete. So we have 4 different options. So if your virtual machine is powered off state, if VM is in a powered off state, so we can use this one. So this will start the VM or nothing, but it will power on the VM, power on the VM. So when a VM gets powered on, what happens is in the underlying. So these are, let's say, VM Azure hypervisors running in the backend, Azure hypervisors running in the backend. Now, when the VM gets created, this VM might be sitting on any one of the hypervisor. Now it is in a powered off state and it basically sitting on this hypervisor. So when you start the virtual machine, the Azure is going to check, hey, there are 4 hypervisors available in this cluster. which hypervisor, that is which server is having the capacity, which virtualization server is having the capacity. Now this server got overutilized. By powering on this virtual machine on this particular host, we are putting a burden on that. Now what Azure will do is will migrate the VM and to the another virtualization host or hypervisor and power on the virtual machine. It feels that, okay, this hypervisor is less consumed the hardware capacity. So by powering on this virtual machine on this particular host will give a better performance to this VM. Then when you start the virtual machine, the virtual machine will have two things. One is a temporary disk and a public IP address. Public IP address. A temporary disk will be attached. So you have a OS disk, and when you start the virtual machine, it will automatically create a temporary disk in the backend and attach that temporary disk to the VM. And a public IP address as a default behavior, when you start the virtual machine, it allocates a public IP address and attach the public IP to the VM. So it's going to create a temporary disk and attached to the VM, and public IP address also will be allocated and will be attached to the VM. And the VM will be powered on any of the underlying, I would say, hypervisor. Basically an underlying hypervisor which has sufficient hardware resources. So it looks for, okay, which hypervisor is having a free capacity, then it will basically power on something. Now, when you stop the virtual machine, so it's going to completely stop the virtual machine and it deallocates the temporary disk and public IP address. So when you stop the virtual machine, what happens is the VM had a public IP and temporary disk. As soon as you stop this virtual machine, the Azure is going to delete the temporary disk. It will delete the temporary disk. And whatever the public IP which has been assigned to this virtual machine will be deallocated. So now let's see that. Now I have the public IP address called as 20.235.241.36. So I'm just making a copy of this one. I'm stopping this virtual machine. Now the virtual machine got successfully stopped. Now refresh it. Now see web app VM1 is in stopped deallocated state. Okay, deallocated state. Click on this VM. So now I'm saying start the VM. Now you have an option called as a restart. Restart is only OS restart, OS reboot. So when you stop the virtual machine and start the virtual machine, the VM may get powered on a different hypervisor. But when you reboot, restart operation, the OS only will get reboot. The temporary disk and public IP address will not get deallocated. And it'll be faster. Just you have some application is not responding or OS not responding. So you want to reboot it, then you can go for a restart. So delete operation is basically a permanent deletion of a VM deletion. Now, when you feel that you don't need a virtual machine anymore, and you want to delete that, and you can basically delete that virtual machine. So you can do these operations on the virtual machine. Now we can see here, restart, stop and delete. So restart is basically an still the VMS. We have to wait until agent states is not ready. Until the VM gets ready, we have to wait. So because there will be agents which will be running inside the virtual machine. So that has to start responding to that. Okay. Now I'm just, okay, let's go to the delete option. So when I delete this VM, now it is asking you, by default OS disk will be deleted along with the VM and network interface card and public IP address. So do you want to delete these also along with the VM? Now I'm saying delete all the resources along with the VM. If I don't select them, these resources will exist. Now, so I'm saying I've read and understood and said delete. Now this virtual machine will be deleted permanently from the Azure environment. Now we cannot bring it back if I don't have a backup available. If I don't have the backup available. So VM got successfully deleted. Now refresh it. Now, so that is showing you. Sometimes the portal takes a bit time. Here we see it's got successfully deleted, but still it is showing the VM is running. Sometimes the portal is like that. Right. Now we can see that VM got deleted. Now when you go to the resource group, and when you delete a resource group, it is going to delete all the resources available under this resource group. Now we can see there are so many resources are existing under a resource group. So when we create a virtual machine, the virtual machine has created many other resources like network security group, VNet, then VM2, like many things, IPs and everything. Now when you delete this, so it is going to delete all the resources. Now just copy it, paste the VM or the resource group name, then it is going to delete all the resources, including the virtual machines, IP address and everything. Typically, if there are some other resources existing in a resource group, it is not advisable to delete the resource group. You can only delete that resource. If you feel that all the resources which are existing under this resource group are not required, then you can delete the resource group, because these actions, the delete actions, cannot be reverted. So if you want to get it back, you cannot get it back because there is no recycle bin concept over here. Okay. So that's how we can create the virtual machine in Azure. In the next lesson, we will see how to connect to the Azure virtual machines, how to change the size of the virtual machine, and we'll basically understand a few things in the next lesson. Okay.